Welcome everyone to the MEDspiration podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nav, and this is episode number 5 with Humble the Poet.
I got 10 years to fill a stadium, but only 2 minutes to fill your cranium. Humble the Poet, signing in.
According to the National Library of Medicine, it is scientifically proven that when we choose to believe in our ability to overcome obstacles and create a positive change for ourselves and the world around us, we manifest a new tool in our mind that enhances our problem-solving practices. You can think of it just like working out. Muscle mass is built repeatedly by lifting the things that are designed to weigh us down. Kobe Bryant said it best. What separates the greats from the all-time greats is their ability to self-assess, diagnose weaknesses, and turn those flaws into strengths. With the proper mindset, the power of our perception can allow us to become a student of our difficult times and to help us find value and strength in the things that may be weighing us down. Putting this into practice doesn't just help you uplift your spirit. It's also been shown under structural MRIs to change the gray matter composition in parts of the brain that have to do with responding to and coping with stress. This is part of the reason why neuroscientists in 2019 are so interested in developing a better understanding of the nature and importance of experiencing mental conflicts when it comes to developing a healthier relationship with failure. That's why in today's episode, I'm sitting down with an individual whose work has been MEDspiring me to have a healthier relationship with failure for more than 5 years now. Humble the Poet just published a book which is called Unlearn, 101 Simple Truths for a Better Life, that'll be dropping next month on April 9th. My man sent me a signed copy of his work, and I had the honor of reading it in its entirety before this interview. It's available for pre-order right now, and the link to that will be in the description below. In this episode, Humble the Poet and I have an open dialogue about mental health, bullying, nature versus nurture, how he overcomes self-doubt, his journey through music and art, psychedelics, and the greatest life lessons he's acquired through his journey. For those of you who are hearing about Humble for the first time, he's a Toronto-bred MC and spoken word artist with an aura that embodies diversity and resiliency. With tattoos, a beard, a head wrap or a turban, and a silly smile, Humble commands attention. He stimulates audiences with ideas that challenge conventional wisdom and go against the grain. He's a best-selling author, was featured in Apple's first Canadian ad for their Shot on iPhone campaign, and a longtime collaborator with Lily Singh. Humble has a unique ability to use his gifts to be in service of those around him. A wise man once said, "I did not start becoming successful until I stopped thinking about myself and started thinking about how I could be useful to other people." A principle I hold closely to my heart, and a principle I believe Humble embodies entirely. This one gets better and better as it goes on, and at the end of the podcast, Humble did such an incredible job answering the questions some of you submitted via our Instagram. Be sure to let us know what you think. You can send us a message through Instagram or tag MEDspiration in your stories while also tagging your friends. Let us know that you're out there and that you're listening. And a special thank you to our sponsor today, Caribbean Medical University. Are you interested in becoming a practicing medical doctor in the United States? CMU is a fully accredited medical school that offers you an incredible opportunity to study abroad in one of the most beautiful Caribbean islands and then transition to the United States for your hospital training. I personally know some great resident physicians here in the Chicago area who went to CMU and loved the experience. Caribbean Medical University has partnered with MEDspiration to bring you a once-in-a-lifetime discount. You can visit cmumed.org/MEDspiration and enter the discount code MDSPR to have your entire application fee waived. That's a $75 value. Apply today and see if medicine is in your future. And without further ado, let the MEDspiration begin.
Focus that energy, get it, boy. Never the enemies kill them, boy. Make them a memory, show up and let me see. Giving up, never me, get it, boy. You're like a tea bag. You don't know how strong you are until you're in hot water. And I think for me, I had to hit that rock bottom.
Life at the bottom, nobody but God got him.
One of the changing points for me was I used to sleep with music playing. And then I heard J. Cole's Dollar in a Dream Part 3 came on. And he goes, what are you going to do? Are you going to grow bitter or grow cold? Or are you going to rise out of it?
Do you fold, grow bitter and grow cold? Or do you flip that fucking dollar to a dream? Whether a scholar or a fiend, watch a pawn become a king.
If this was the last day of your life, what would the decision be? And I've been really kind of pushing that, towards myself. Once I started having my tough times and my challenges, I started to see the value in them, and I stopped kind of looking at them as bad luck, bad days, bad news, and really tried to be like, hey, what can I gain from this? And it's no different than seeing how 50 Cent turned getting shot 9 times into a career. We have the power to take something, and if we don't judge it, we can really manipulate it into whatever we want to be.
I got 10 years to fill a stadium, but only 2 minutes to fill your cranium. Humble the poet, signing in.
But Humble, what if I already made a bunch of stupid decisions in the past, and now I keep reliving and regretting them? Is it too late?
I'm glad you asked, my kind of handsome friend. When you think about the regrets you have in your life, instead of kicking yourself over them, look at those choices and ask yourself, was it simply a case of you choosing the short term over the long term? And if it was, learn from it.
And if you learn from it, then this regret should no longer be a regret, but instead a jewel of wisdom that is helping you level up in your life.
I can't go back, I can't go back. I ain't make it this far just to make it this far.
This type of mindfulness is not a light switch. It's more like our mind is a pond, and we're trying our best to keep the water calm. Because once you do, you can see clearly into it. And that's why it's called mental clarity.
Humble the Poet, welcome to the MEDspiration podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be having a conversation with a man who's been one of my heroes for the last 5 years. Humble, your writing, it's inspired me so much through 4 years of medical school. And bro, your insights, the things you write on Instagram, they've helped me through my own introspections and my own dreams. So I wanted to thank you for adding to the world the way that you do. And my intention today is to have an open dialogue regarding mental health and your book, 101 Life Lessons. I had the blessing of reading this book before we get to talk. And, this is actually the signed copy. So I got your John Hancock right there, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you got that. That's actually the Canadian version. That's a unique one. That one's not going to be making its way to the States anytime soon, so hold on to that.
Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
I am a Toronto born and raised artist, creative, and I kind of do everything, bring ideas to life, put words together. In a previous life, I was an elementary school teacher, and pretty much just after work, I started going to spoken word poetry events as a way to, kind of scratch my creative itch and as well as meet girls. And started performing on stage, and then that took me from one place to another. And then in my artistic journey, started digging deeper into the world, trying to have a better understanding of why the world was the way it was, and started talking about social issues. And then that evolved into me kind of going even deeper and realizing that, it's all about the human condition. So I became a master student of the human condition, writing about it, exploring it. At the same time, just had my own trials and tribulations, leaving my job as a school teacher and my safe and secure salary to pursue full-time art, as an adult. And that whole journey in itself required me to really have a better understanding of myself, better understanding of life, and, how to feel better and make life feel lighter without, saying any fluffy Tumblr bullshit. And that kind of got me into writing a lot. And then the audience, that I had at the time motivated me to write a book. And then I was like, this is great. I can sell this book at my shows and it'll be cool. But then the book continued to take a life of its own, and it just keeps growing. And actually, what you're holding right there is the second book. But the first book is getting its debut in the States now in April with HarperCollins.
April. So it's been about 10 years now you've been on your creative journey since you retired from the school teaching, right?
It's been 10 years since I started taking Humble the Poet serious, and then I left my job right at the beginning of 2011. So I'm at 8 years full time. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. So, after reading your book, I love the way you crafted it together. Each chapter is really short and sweet. And most of them are a little bit around 1 page or 2 pages. So they're really easy to digest. So what inspired you to write it this way?
There's actually a lot of writers that I kind of gravitated towards were the ones that kept it short and sweet. And what I really kind of wanted was something that was convenient, not so much of a bore. I'm not the biggest reader. I'll grab a book and start reading it and get real tired real quick. And I think trying to, the teacher in me always make accommodations, meet your audience where they're at. So I really wanted to create something that, A, I didn't get bored reading, but B, also understanding that, an audience in their teens and their early 20s that, just used to flicking their thumb on Instagram with just this immediate gratification can kind of handle this. And at the same time, too, just kind of really understanding the idea of not chunking too much information. I mean, you're a med student, you understand how much you can take in before, it's just, you're just spinning your wheels after a certain time. So really trying to create that same situation with this book. So it's like, hey, don't make it too long. Make every chapter 1 to 2 pages. You don't have to read it in order. You can kind of pick it up randomly, read it the way you want to read it. And, kind of allowing it to be much more convenient, quick and easy, but at the same time, not being as unhealthy as, let's say, fast food.
Yeah. Hey, it created that vibe too, because, I'd read like a chapter a day. I've kind of had this book for a while now, and it was nice to go back and feel like, oh, I just read 1 page and I've finished a chapter and just kind of reflect on that for a little bit. So, I'm going to jump straight into the book, man. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And, I want to start with the very last lesson, which is lesson 101. It's titled Duk Daru. So there's a verse in the Guru Granth Sahib that mentions Duk Daru Sukh Rog Paya Ja Sukh Tamna Hoy. And the translation in English means pain is medicine and comfort is disease. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, we always hear about life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And, Bill Gates said success is a lousy teacher. So, I've been seeing this trend that in Sikh philosophy, which was, Dogdaru Sugrok Pe Ajasukam Nahoy was probably written in the 1500s. So, a solid 500 years ago, this idea was also explored so poetically and so simply, and it was written in poetry. So it's not even written in a complete sentence. And I found that amazing. And just really, once I became an adult and I was able to kind of get my own education on Sikh history and Sikh philosophy beyond kind of what my parents were able to teach me, it helped me start to realize, like, hey, these guys really were students of the human condition and human ideas. And it made me realize that, hey, this stuff is universal, not because there's some sort of supreme truth, and it's not because they're the originators of this truth. It's because they're keeping this truth alive. And this truth is, you can see Confucius talking about this stuff. You can see Buddha talking about this stuff. These are these types of truths that, they don't need to be discovered. They just need to be kept alive. Someone needs to breathe some air into them every once in a while to keep them floating through the air. So I think for me, once I started having my tough times and my challenges, I started to see the value in them. And I stopped kind of looking at them as bad luck, bad days, bad news, and really tried to be like, hey, what can I gain from this? And, it's no different than, seeing how 50 Cent turned getting shot 9 times into a career. We have the power to take something, and if we don't judge it, we can really manipulate it into whatever we want to be. And this isn't something mystical or magical. This is just literally having a better attitude and a better perspective.
100%, man. I just had a conversation with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's trainer. His name's Tim Grover. He's a Singh. So Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's trainer was actually a Singh, right? And
dope.
He was a D1 collegiate basketball player, which for us Browns, that's about as good as it gets. And he ended up blowing out his knee, right? And what he ended up doing, he said that was the best thing that ever happened to him, because when he blew out his knee, he was able to realize he was supposed to be a trainer for professional athletes. And then he went on to become one of the greatest trainers of all time. And we actually talked about something that was published in Stanford. It was talking about post-traumatic growth. So individuals who are able to look at trauma as something they could grow from, something they could learn from, they're actually able to do exactly what you just said. They're able to transform that into something that's beneficial, right? And when we talk about muscle mass, which you mentioned in the book, so muscle mass is created repeatedly by lifting things that are designed to weigh us down, right? And that holds true mentally, physically, and spiritually. I'm a big believer of this concept. That's why I love that you ended the book with this. Next, I wanted to talk about lesson 100, Osama, right? So you mentioned after 9/11, the most popular beard and turban on the planet was Osama bin Laden. And I read how that impacted your life. So when 9/11 happened, I was 11 years old. And all of a sudden, man, I was being bullied for just being brown. And I didn't even wear a turban. You know, and you wore a turban. So I can only imagine the discrimination you were faced with, right? So somewhere out there right now is a little brown boy who's being bullied just for being the way he looks, right? So what's your advice to someone like that?
Find the value in it. It ain't going away. And, especially if you are if you are of Sikh heritage, we thrive off a little bit of friction, a little bit of conflict. It's been in our history. It probably goes the other way around. Be a little bit more uneasy if everything's working out well. There's always got to be a little bit of resistance. As you said, we build muscle mass through resistance training. If you had an easy day at the gym, you're probably not going to make much progress. And I think for me now that I've been old enough to kind of watch my story play out, the value of all the challenges I went through with racism, discrimination, being conveniently randomly screened at every airport I've ever been to, there's a lot of value that came from it that helped really, create a layer of skin for me that, you're never going to have to worry about me getting cyberbullied or letting the internet impact my mental health. But at the same time, it also allowed me to build a level of compassion I probably would have never had, for anybody who is identified as the other or an underrepresented group and, struggling to find their own voice. And I think it's really important when we start looking at it that way, because what it does is it helps us find our strength. If, we lived in a society where guys like you and me, were the majority and our ideas were the majority, we'd probably suffer a lot of atrophy, mental, spiritual, atrophy, because there wouldn't be much challenge. There wouldn't be much discourse where, I grew up in a position where every day I had to defend my identity. In the beginning, it probably wasn't even my identity. It's just what was given to me through birth. And, going through the motions of wishing I was just normal, wishing I could just blend in, and getting a little bit older, traveling places, realizing how much I stood out, not being able to be a tourist anywhere. Because if I went to festival, you want to just watch what's happening, everybody stops and looks at you, and rightfully so. They've never seen someone that looks like me. If I see a guy walking down the street with a purple mohawk and 18 tattoos on his face, I'll probably stare too. And I think for me in the beginning, that was a point of frustration. But I think what it also did was it helped me build a level of resilience that is really helping me now. And I think in this modern age, with all the talk of, vocal minorities and underrepresented individuals, it's really put me in a position where I was like, hey, I've kind of been through the gauntlet, and I'm in a position to help people see a different perspective so they can empower themselves and, not rely on self-pity or victimization as the only option when we encounter these challenges. And you start to realize too, like, hey, even if somebody grew up as a Caucasian kid in an all Caucasian neighborhood and an all Caucasian school, they were still finding reasons to pick on each other. Picking on somebody for their weight or for their freckles or for being a ginger or what have you. And, our parents came from India, which is the origins of the art of discrimination in so many different ways. So it's kind of, we're kind of the originators of this. So I don't take it personal. I mean, 9/11 did make it challenging. And, my first trip to New York after that wasn't the most pleasant, but I'm glad I went through it. And I think it built a certain level of resilience. And, I see with my nephew now, he's growing up in a community where that's not going to be as much of an issue. but at the same time, I'm sure he'll have his own challenges. And I think what it did for me was allowed me to find more value in difficult times. Going back to Dogdaru, it's all connected.
Dog. Yeah, I believe that fully. And, that's a theme that carries out throughout your book where you say the discomfort that comes with that discrimination is good. You learn from it, you grow from it, you connect with others based off of it. So, I'm a firm believer, being aware of that power of our perception, it goes a long way in taking control of them. And it seems like that's a really positive way to look at it overall. Like, it's a way to look at your adversity as an opportunity. Definitely couldn't agree more with that. So next, I wanted to talk about Lesson 98. I wanted to connect it to a post that you did on Instagram where you mentioned you are not your beliefs and how that relates to markers and labels. Can you delve a little bit deeper into that?
I used to work as a school teacher, and one of the big things that stood out to me was how much of an empty vessel a kid was. And it really started making you go back to your own self. You're like, whoa, like how much of me is me and how much of me is what's been taught to me or quote unquote programmed. And often they call it's the popular battle between nurture and nature. But, you start to realize it's not a battle between the two. They work together. And it's really about understanding how your personal nurture and how your personal nature are kind of working together. And for me, when it came to these types of situations, I started asking myself, like, okay, so what values and beliefs do I hold and where did they come from? Whether it was believing in God, whether it was believing in right or wrong, whether it was leaning left politically, leaning right politically, whether it was my favorite flavor of ice cream, how much of this was my natural, who I was, how much of it was taught. And I really try to stress to the audience is like, I don't really care what you believe. I just care how you believe and how you got those beliefs. And oftentimes people create their own cages around themselves with these beliefs that they have, that they limit themselves, they limit their own potential. And again, I'm not talking on some, super mystical level that, you can fly if you believe you can. I'm just talking about, hey, you can create a life that you want to create, and it may be beyond what the people in your neighborhood and your family think is right for you.
Amen.
And I think, I think just the life that I've been able to live, possible, so many things that would be considered even improbable for, a young brown guy to do, witness, contribute, have an impact on, I've been able to kind of see past that and accomplish past that. So now, words like impossible don't have much meaning for me. And I think it doesn't necessarily require you to have a belief in something. It just requires you to have a better understanding of why you believe the things you believe. And it's been a tricky topic. So a lot of people don't ever want to touch on that. They don't want to offend people. But I think it's very, very, very important that people understand that your beliefs are just strongly held opinions. And we shouldn't be married to any of our beliefs. If anything, we should be comfortable with our beliefs being scrutinized, and we should find, in my personal opinion, happiness and joy when our beliefs are challenged, and even if we let go of them, because I do like the idea that who I am today is not the same guy I was 5 years ago, and who I'm going to be in 5 years is not the guy I am today.
Medicine, we learn that a lot because, as you're growing and learning how to be a caretaker, you realize you're wrong so many of times. So you might make an idea in your head about what you're supposed to do, and then you realize your superiors, they'll teach you where you're wrong. And I quickly learned going through med school that I have to embrace being wrong, and I have to embrace it as an opportunity to learn, because that's how I'm going to continuously build on top of what I'm doing. It's not just about, oh, I got it figured out and now there's nothing more. It's always about challenging my beliefs and updating them regularly in a way that can integrate more information over time, right? So
and I think as well for you as a med student, but is that you guys also see value in failure. So you conduct an experiment, whatever it may be. Every time something doesn't work, that's something that you can check off the list, whether you're trying to do a diagnosis or what have you. Like, all right, we tested for this, that came out negative. Most people, when they try something out and it comes out negative, they view that as a negative outcome. Yeah. Whereas as a student, you're like, hey, let me try this. That didn't work. All right, on to the next, on to the next. And there isn't a personal connection with the outcome. And I think if more people took that approach to their own lives, we dramatically improve our own personal conditions, as well as having a healthier relationship with what we commonly call failure.
Amen to that, man. You spoke about something Jay Shetty said once. It was stop identifying the gaps in your life in relation to who's in the room, right? And this resonated so deeply with me. Can you tell us a little bit about what you and him meant?
Well, I mean, Jay is just a magical creature.
Yeah, man.
It's just a whole different level of person with him. And me and him, when I'm in LA, I get to I go over to his place, and what we call them rooftop conversations. He lives in a I guess it's like a condo / hotel situation. So there's like a really nice rooftop, and we sat on his rooftop where they got a little cabana and a pool and stuff, and we just talk, and we'll just sit there and talk for hours. And he'll say something, and I'll just stop everything and start writing stuff down. I might say something, and he might really resonate with it. And I think what happened was he was literally just explaining to me like a very boring logistical conversation about how he has a certain business set up. And I think I immediately said something along the lines of, man, I got to get that set up. And he kind of said something to me along the lines of like, well, if you weren't thinking about it yesterday, don't make it a priority today. Like, you've only identified that gap because you heard me talk about it. Wow. And he goes, later on today, you're going to go sit with somebody else, talk to them about something, and then they're going to show you another gap. And he goes, that's an endless gap. It's an endless gap with whoever you meet. So, today you met an entrepreneur who's 5 years ahead of you. Now you want to start structuring your business the way he did because you don't have it structured so-and-so. And then, tomorrow you meet somebody with lower body fat than you. Now you're like, all right, I need to start focusing on, losing weight. And then the day after you see somebody with a nicer car, or the day after you see somebody with a healthier family dynamic than you, and you start focusing on that. So I think the really good thing he was trying to really encourage me was like, hey, stay your course. Don't let these conversations that we have deviate you from what you're already focused on, because we all have to acknowledge we only have 24 hours in a day. We only have a limited amount of decisions we can make a day, and energy and love and attention that we can devote per day. And if we just start to immediately identify our gaps every time we see somebody else doing something different, it's an endless journey, especially if you're talking about social media, because now you're just flicking your thumb through social media, and now you start seeing people, and they're going to, by default, help you identify new gaps in your life. And then you get to a point where you're just like, oh, I need a puppy. So-and-so's got a puppy in their picture. Then you're like, oh, I need to get my taxes done. I need to, start setting up my website. I need to start doing stuff. And none of it is things that are actually important to you. They're just gaps that have been identified based off your interaction with somebody else.
So what can we do? Like, say, now that we're talking about this conversation, I know I'm going to become aware of every time I am seeing a gap. What's something you would tell to someone like me?
I think, you got to know what's really important to you, and you have to recognize, that you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything at once. Cool. So you really have to focus on what's really important to you, and then from there, kind of stay the course. I think the common thing that I've seen with every single successful person I know, especially the ones who I saw start out and, hit new highs, whether it be Lily or a couple of other artists I work with, it's the fact that they stuck with it. Yep. Sticking with it means, it may not be the blinders, but you're still, I'm on this course. I am focusing on this. This is something I'm excited and enthusiastic about. I am signed up for the challenges and problems that come with it, but I'm not going to deviate tomorrow because all of a sudden, somebody introduces a new social media program or a platform, and I got to jump on that, start catching up to that bullshit or whatever. And so I say, always continually focus on self-awareness, because with self-awareness, you'll really have a better understanding of your own natural enthusiasms and maybe your chosen purpose or the purpose you decide for yourself, and stay that course. And yeah, it's fine if somebody lets you realize, hey, I got to register my business, or hey, I got to make sure I fill out these tax forms. By all means, put them on the list, but just realize every single person you meet has something that you don't have. Yeah. And you're going to be spinning your wheels forever trying to catch up. But at the same time, every person you meet needs something that you got. And we can, as human beings, maybe even as living creatures. We're by default going to focus on the things that are out of place because that's the survival mechanism that we have. That helps us realize, where potential danger could exist. So we're always going to be identifying our gaps anyways. Identify the gap, hear it, let it go, and get back to what you need to do because success is only going to come from sticking with it.
Amen to that. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Next, I wanted to touch on a lesson that also really connected with me. That was 27 and not dead. You mentioned that notable celebrities died at the age of 27, which included Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse. So can you tell us a little bit about what you meant?
I think now, because I wrote this book, the book you're talking about, I finished it in 2015. I wrote it, I think what I was searching for at that point was kind of my moment of significance. Mm-hmm. All humans have a need of significance, and we find it in a million different ways. So, you can find it by having 1 million Instagram followers. You can find it by dating somebody who's completely dependent on you. You can find it by having children. You can find it by, winning the Super Bowl, just this need of significance, this need of being seen. And I think at that point in my artistic career, I was kind of feeling this lack of acknowledgement or need, but at the same time, not being aware that I had this urge of significance. And I think when it came to that idea of some of the most prolific artists, they passed away at 27. They left their indentation. They tattooed their legacy and their impact on the world, and it'll be there forever. Or as long as now I'm realizing, or as long as our generation exists, because every day less and less people are talking about Elvis, and less people will talk about Jordan, and now whatever the cool rappers are or the cool artists that are being celebrated 50 years from now, they'll be forgotten too. So I think it was born out of my need for significance. And I think at this point now, I've kind of recognized that need and, how I can create a more sustainable life to still kind of have that feeling. And I think for me now, that's come through adding value for other people. I can feel significant, adding value for other people, and it's more sustainable. And I think that's what it is. It's not that it's better or worse in another way. It's just I can keep doing this without killing myself.
I realized the same thing along my line of work. At one point, I realized when I'm living in service of others and I'm trying to improve the quality of life of people around me, I'm more creative and I have more energy. And as you mentioned, so we can't look at what makes others special and want that for ourselves because it's no longer special. You write in your book, we all have something within us that is special. And this is something that it's a principle that I live by. You just said that, we can learn something from everybody around us. And, I have this personal mantra where I have to believe that everybody out there has something special inside of them. It's really up to them whether they want to believe in themselves enough to tap into that and maybe create through that and give to the world. But is that something that you feel like is true?
I feel like, the more and more, I've taken a deeper dive into it, it's really kind of got interesting because I'm not the most into, believing in the supernatural or kind of believing into ideas of fate or whatever. But when you start digging into yourself, even scientifically, and starting to look at what you're made of on a molecular level, you're kind of just like, wait, I am composed of all these things that are moving at random.
Yeah.
And I am a combination of all these things that are moving at random, from the smallest quartz, I don't even know what the smallest thing is called anymore, to what we define as our body, where we start and where the rest of existence stops and starts, whatever, is really a perception thing because with air has molecules, our skin has molecules, where does it start and stop is up to us. And you start to realize you're like, hey, well, if it's all random, do I have any real free will? You decided, yes, you have free will. Even if you are a combination of random molecules moving around, if you kill somebody, we're putting you in jail. But I started to realize that we have these natural, all of us have our own natural enthusiasms. We start to lean towards things. We start to fall in love with things. We start to gravitate towards certain things that it kind of really feels like it was just coded in us, whether you want to believe that coding was divine or whether you want to believe that coding in itself was just random or a pattern, from our lineage and our heritage. So I think from that perspective, it's kind of like, hey, you have to discover yourself in relation to the rest of the world and see what happens. So for me, again, I started as a spoken word artist, and then that converted to rap. And then I thought, hip hop was my life. And then that converted into writing. So I was like, no, it was never about just hip hop and rap. It was about putting words together. And I did books, but then also directing my own music videos and doing both on a very high level and getting enough validation and success to keep doing them and not, treating them as hobbies anymore. And being like, well, what parts of this are exciting to me? And I think I started to measure it as, hey, well, what parts of these, what type of things am I doing where I'm encountering challenges and problems regularly, but they don't frustrate me? I'm excited for it. I credit my accountant with that, actually. He, when my book first dropped and, it was available on Amazon, and I'd be getting checks in American dollars, Canadian dollars, British pounds, and euros, because Amazon sold in all those places. I get all these checks. And just his level of excitement towards doing my taxes with all those different currencies, because he had never seen it before.
That's dope.
And it helped me, and it was stressful. I just wanted to not deal with it. And he was just excited, and God, I'm so excited to tackle this. And I'm like, you're a really good example of somebody who's in the right field. Like, you enjoy what you do, and it's no different than Eminem putting words together. These guys are obsessed with what they do. So it is a matter of really doing a lot of self, exploration, trying to figure out your natural enthusiasms and opinions. Maybe even abandon this idea of living a passion, because I think where an obsession is what we need. And again, I don't know if we get to choose it. I really don't know if we get to choose this obsession, because I think it starts when it hits us on a molecular level into our core and it excites us. I'm not sure how much of that is our nurture versus our nature.
That's deep, bro. Great way to think of it. So next, I do want to talk on lesson 25. It's called Poison. And you mentioned the damaging voice in your life is the one inside your head. I don't know what terrible things other people spit your way, but that shit is effective only if it finds a voice within you to hold hands with, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
If somebody calls me ugly, it's not going to impact me as hard unless I've already had a voice in here calling me ugly. And now their opinion and that inner voice of mine, now they begin to hold hands, and that kind of empowers them. I think about that a lot, because sometimes, as you said, identifying gaps in your life, it goes back to that saying, everything kind of ties in together, where we have to be really mindful of the voices that we have in our head and even where they came from.
Yep.
I got voices in my head from like when I was 10 years old, from that one kid I met once who was a dickhead to me, and and it stuck and it never went away. And interestingly enough, and the new book I'm working on that drops in November, I actually tell a story about one of these kids. And what it was is I met a kid, 10 years old. He was very mean and rude and racist towards me. And, we're in junior school, and it was something I didn't obviously appreciate, but I didn't see him again until I ran into him at a party in university.
Wow.
And he was a completely different person. And by completely different person, I just mean a normal adult. Like, like most of us, he grew up from being a little dumbass kid into a regular adult. And when I saw him, he was like, hey, man, welcome to the party. You want something to drink? What's going on? Like, he didn't remember me, but I remembered him because he had such an impact on me. Wow. But I think what it made me realize was like, hey, man, like, you tattooed this kid in your head who doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And you've allowed that voice to have this real estate in your head. Now, if anybody else sounds like him, it empowers them. So if somebody says something that what that kid said, it can still get underneath my skin. And I feel like the moment I became aware of this, that voice lost some of its power.
Wow.
And and even till this day, there's still some of these voices and some of these needs to win over certain people or certain types of people, and I'm being very cognizant of them. I was like, well, where does this come from? Why am I trying to win these people over? Especially since I've had a lot of good things happen to me in my career on different levels, and I still kind of feel a chip on my shoulder. But I think what I'm not going to do is validate them and derail everything I've created just to make a certain subset of people happy because 15 years ago, somebody hurt my feelings. And sometimes we just don't realize that we create these survival mechanisms to deal with that stuff that happened back then, and we never update it. I didn't grow up in a rough neighborhood, but my school was in a rough neighborhood, my middle school and my high school. So certain survival mechanisms and techniques and just ways of living that were necessary for me to survive those years, I carried them into places that they didn't need to be. When I became a school teacher, I didn't need that anymore. When I became an adult, I didn't need them anymore. And I started to realize that, hey, this stuff is holding me back more than it's helping me now. Yeah. And a lot of us just really have to go through that and be like, okay, I needed this when I was living with so-and-so, or I needed this when I was the little brother or when I was the older brother. But now, let's say you're the older brother and you had to, wrangle all your younger siblings. But now you're adults and your younger siblings ain't kids anymore. They don't need you to wrangle them anymore. It's about letting that stuff go. So I think this idea of the poison that we carry, because sometimes we don't realize that we hold on to familiarity more than anything else. And if it's familiar, we'll pick it over good, even if it's a horrible situation. So I think that's kind of what that realization was for me. It doesn't go away. I'm still dealing with it. And I'm sure once I address one voice, another voice will start, will take that real estate and it'll continue. And I think it's just about realizing that these voices aren't the enemy. They were there. They served the purpose. And now it's just time to let them go.
I hope that resonates with everybody out there as much as it resonates with me. So thank you for that. I did want to discuss a post you did back in December, and it kind of reminded me, because you were just talking about something like that. The strongest don't survive, the most adaptable do. And, you mentioned you started your journey 10 years ago and how you had favorite artists, you had people that you really look up to and you thought they would kill it. And then you had other people who you're like, I don't know if I really like their stuff, but, we'll see what happens. And you notice the people who really stuck with it are the ones that get through, right? So can you tell us about what you've learned through that journey?
I think just realizing that, I think the rapper Plies, he said it. He said, I know a lot of dumb rich people, but I don't know any lazy rich people. And I think I kind of figured that out as well too as an artist, because I think when I first came in, I came in very idealistic. I came in like, hey, I'm gonna clean up the game. I'm gonna bring lyricism back. I'm gonna do this. Forget all that. Poppy, snap your finger music, laffy taffy shit. Forget all that. But then you start to realize as you kind of get into the game, you're like, yo, no. If you've heard of these people, and even if they're making what you consider bubblegum music, they've had to put in a lot of work just to get there. Nothing is handed to any of these people, and they had a work ethic that got them there, whether you agree with their artwork or not. And that really made me have a whole new appreciation for artists. I think in the beginning, I was only measuring them in terms of, do I like what they're putting out there? And I think later on, it became like, hey, if I know who this person is, that means they had to have worked, 1,000 times harder than the average human being to get to this point. Even with hookups, even if they have a famous father or mother, like, it's not easy. And I realized that even recently meeting some Bollywood actors. Some of these guys are grandchildren and children of other famous Bollywood actors, and it's still not easy for them. It's still tough competition. They have to work harder than anybody who wants to make it in Hollywood. It's really crazy. Wow. And I think really having a value and appreciation for that effort, especially now that almost 10 years has gone by and I've seen so many people's stories play out. And some of the most talented people who didn't have that work ethic, they kind of fell to the wayside and found something more realistic to do.
Oh, that's real, man. So you said yesterday in your takeover for Chapters Indigo, I know I sound like I just stalk you all the time.
No, I appreciate it, man. It's thorough. I appreciate this.
Yeah. You said you don't think that there's anything more important than gratitude, right? And, healthcare and medicine is really coming to this point now where we're realizing how powerful gratitude can be for the mind, body, and spirit, right? So can you tell us a little bit about what you know about gratitude?
I think we all kind of are on the same page when it comes to the importance of gratitude. I think, I think in that post I mentioned a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or something, and I said along the lines of, hey, the only reason you enjoy the car or you enjoy the trip around the world or that first class flight is because you are able to express gratitude towards it, Boom. And if you're unable to express gratitude towards it, you won't enjoy it. And the challenge in who we are as humans is we get very comfortable very quickly, and we grow accustomed to whatever our conditions are, good or bad. I started seeing that pattern with myself, started seeing that pattern with other people I knew, especially once I started spending more time in Los Angeles and Hollywood. It's seeing people that have things, especially when I was, in my early years, when I was a complete struggling artist, seeing people who had significantly more than I could ever dream of, and still seeing them unhappy, seeing them miserable, seeing them stressed out, seeing them complaining. And realizing that a lot of that had to do with the fact that they got used to it. Like, okay, the first red carpet is exciting. The second red carpet is exciting. The third one gets a little bit annoying. The 10th one is just work. The first movie premiere, the second movie, you start to realize that's with everything.
That's real.
You're a med student. The first day that you get that full-time situation. It was no different when I was a teacher. I went from being a student teacher to a full-time teacher to having student teachers under me. You're going from resident to full-time doctor, and you're going to have that moment where you're like, yo, I'm done. Finally, I ain't got to answer to nobody. And then a couple of years later, you're the guy who's treating the residents. And it's a cycle. And you'll get used to whatever conditions you have. You'll get used to whatever money you make. You'll get used to whatever perks and lifestyle you have. And, that's just in our nature. And I think for me, I've become very cognizant of that. So I try to really live the spectrum. So, in December, the first week of December, I was at Nick Jonas and Priyanka Chopra's wedding, and we were in a palace. A week later, I'm staying in my friend's apartment in Berlin, and, he doesn't turn on his heat because he just spent 6 weeks living in Palestine doing community service and living nice and simple. So he ain't got no heat on. And I was like, I appreciate the spectrum because I don't want to get used to staying in palaces. And obviously, I don't want to get used to staying in cold-ass Berlin apartments either. But I appreciate that I can have that breadth of experience. And I think for me, that's been the real thing that I've been thinking about is being able to have that gratitude and growing from some uncomfortable conditions. And I think it's also a principle of stoicism, where they encourage you to spend 3 days away from everything you love, 3 days a month, from all the luxuries of your life. Because we appreciate everything, we'll appreciate it more in its absence. And let's not wait till we completely lose something to appreciate it. So I think for me, really trying to look at gratitude as an art, looking at it as a religion, because I really feel like it's an easy sell to get people on board because they're already expressing gratitude on a daily basis. They've just lost the ability to express gratitude for some of the simplest things in life.
I agree, man. What we focus on, it expands, and we're either counting our blessings or we're counting what we don't have, right? So it's pretty simple. One leads towards a direction of stress, and the other's in the opposite direction, And a lot of what you mentioned, there's a lot of neurochemistry involved there. That's the same for everybody. It's a lot like doing a drug. You get this dopamine surge when you do a drug, but then the more you do the drug, the less dopamine that comes out on the other side. But then the more drug you crave, and you create this cycle of just, I want more, I want more. And I really do believe one of the best ways to take a step out is to take a deep breath and to practice gratitude. No matter how much we accomplish, we're always going to feel like we didn't do enough until we start really finding gratitude for it, and that's something that, no matter how old you are, it's always going to be relevant. I do appreciate you sharing that.
And I think just to add on to that, I really want people to also understand that, these cycles of dopamine chases, I don't want people to look at that as wrong. We're all suckers for it in one way or the other.
Yep.
I just want people to ask the simple question of, however they're going about it right now, is it sustainable or not? And I think it just continue going. I always kind of go back to that question. It's like,
wisdom.
Do you think you can keep this up for the next 10 years without burning out? And I think, again, me searching for excuses to say thank you, I could do that forever. Me being like, I got 300,000 followers on Instagram. Now I need 4. Now I need 1 million. Now I need 5 million. I don't know if that's as sustainable as me being like, hey, can I say thank you because I can walk barefoot in the grass? Can I say thank you for the sunshine today?
I that concept of sustainability, I tell my homies this all the time. I got friends who have such big dreams. We're in our late 20s and we're really trying to make an impact on the globe. And I'm always like, hey, now if you want to make this sustainable for more than 10 years, think about your lifestyle. Are you drinking too much? Are you doing too many drugs? Make sure that you can do all this and keep it sustainable for long periods of time. And I think you could use that just as a tangible remind yourself, where am I? What am I doing? Can I keep this going? So that was, it really clicked in my head when you said that. I really like that. So next question I have for you: do you meditate or do you pray?
I currently do not pray. I have in the world of meditation, I've tried a little bit. I do. So right now, currently, I suffered a back injury in June of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have like a stretching program that I have to do. I got to keep those, keep the glutes loose. I got to keep the hamstrings loose. So what I've been trying to do is use that stretching as an opportunity to meditate. So currently it's just counting out loud, quietly, trying to recenter my breathing. So I think focusing on being present is a little bit something I do. But in the traditional, do I sit there sense? I'll be 1,000% honest. No, I actually, somebody gave me a 1-year free membership to Headspace, and I've opened it like 3 times. And again, a lot of it that might have to do with even identifying gaps. I know it was Jay, and he said something along the lines of, obviously 10 minutes a day is better than nothing, but 10 minutes a day isn't much. He goes, we have to live a life of immersion. We have to immerse ourselves into things, and definitely making an effort to stay present. But in the world of traditional sit down, shut the fuck up, rid myself of all sounds and everything meditation, it's not happening as much right now. There's a busy brain up there, but I'm working on it.
Okay, respect. So how has your faith in God or the universe, how has it helped you achieve your biggest aspirations, or has it helped?
That's why, again, I'm literally 3 weeks away from finishing my next book, and this is gonna be long chapters. So each of these chapters is like 5 pages, and one of them is my entire relationship with God from like little kid, to the first time I remember really praying to like where I am now. I think the importance of faith, the importance of believing in something beyond us, or believing that we're not the end all be all. I see value in that. I'm a little bit more grounded in what you see is what you get. I'm a big proponent of science. I'm a big proponent of I don't knowism. I enjoy having my beliefs challenged and wiped off the table, and me being like, whoa, at this age I just learned something I've never knew ever existed before. So I'm not very rigid in any beliefs I hold like that, but I do have a lot of respect and see the value of even traditional Western Christian religion, because it's what's not an opinion is that it is the foundation of the society you and I both grew up in. Mm-hmm. And as now there are obviously people who are exploiting it for their own personal profit, just as people are in Sikhi, just as people are in pretty much every faith. Religion is a great way to keep uneducated people from asking too many questions, and keep people living in unequitable conditions to help them justify that. The karma system is horrible for that, making people think it's that they're supposed to be where they are, and not really encouraging any social mobility. But I do feel like a lot of these faiths and ideas, they existed before the scientific method was perfected. And so I look at it as an art, the art of being a good person, the art of being a better person. It's just a bunch of human beings try their best to create that art. Yeah. I don't think the guys who made it in the beginning were sitting there trying to figure out how they can profit off of it. I don't think it was a Scientology or anything like that. But where it's at right now is a different story. So I always challenge people to keep mind of their beliefs, but I do have a lot of respect for religion in terms of it being the art of being a better person. But again, with my work in both the books that I have that are out, I do talk a lot about Sikh philosophy. I try not to push it to people as a religion. And I really do try to make it more of a study of human nature and having a better relationship with the truth, whatever that may be.
Likewise, man. So, I believe the longest chapter in your book is lesson 39, and it's titled Ayahuasca. And, now we've had multiple healthcare professionals on our podcast, last of which was a neurosurgeon named Dr. Eben Alexander, who have confirmed research into psychedelics, and it's showing that they can play an important role in mental health if done in the proper setting. And disclaimer, I don't recommend anybody doing them recreationally, but you spoke a little bit about your experience in Lima, Peru, right? And man, this was fascinating. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, so I actually went at the recommendation of a pharmacist. So he was a pharmacist. I literally thought in my head, I was like, whoa, this guy's a responsible adult, and he did this, and he didn't die. And his wife went with him. She didn't participate, and even she said it was a great experience. So and then I ended up going to the one place at the time in Peru that was actually the only place that was approved by the Peruvian Board of Health. And, there was a nurse on site because I was very mindful. I was like, man, my story can't end with me dying in the jungles of Peru when I walked there. Yeah. But it was definitely, what it was is I had and previously, recreationally and, in my own goals of trying to understand myself as well. But on both, I'd done mushrooms. And the one thing I had realized with mushrooms was, look, if your life if things aren't in order, this is just going to bring it all out. And you're going to have a very unpleasant time. And for me, that meant like if you had an unpaid bill that you just forgot to pay off at the point. So this ayahuasca trip was it was my celebration of getting out of debt. I was in a lot of debt for about four years. And this was, I had just got to zero. It was a very unique experience. I think now with the education I have, I probably don't encourage people to spend that amount of money. I don't think it's completely necessary. That's a little bit the shamanism and all of it is a little bit more novelty, the way I look at it. And I think as well in the chapter, I haven't revisited that in a while, but I think I do talk a lot about it as more of a psychedelic versus a scientific, spiritual experience.
Yeah, you do.
So I think a little bit more of, hearing talks from chemical engineers or what have you, really kind of explain that, hey, you can't even use the word ayahuasca because there's 10,000 different variations of the recipe, and a lot of it could be made. It was a unique experience. It was something that I had really wanted to do, and when we got there, there was a lot of novelty. We, having our tea leaves read, having a whole day of silence, and then when we actually took the drink, so ayahuasca translates to the root of death, and pretty much the way it was described to me before, it was like, this is mushrooms on acid, and you mix them together, see where it takes you, and it helps you learn a lot about yourself. And I think what the experience does is it really, another friend had equated this to acid actually, but he pretty much said it's like being in a very crowded room naked. And some people consider that hell. Some people consider that the most liberating thing in the world.
Okay.
Yeah, all about your perception. So I think with ayahuasca, it put me in that same situation where it was, there was a combination of, when that DMT kicks in and you kind of have this one with everything, and that's no different than what people are trying to accomplish with their meditation. Siki talks about that a lot too. Just, no longer seeing yourself as a drop and realizing you're a part of the ocean. But at the same time, having this calm and this peace. And I think what it did for me is it really helped me understand what death will probably feel like. I think we all, from a scientific perspective too, like when it's time to go, the brain's just going to flood us with this stuff.
Yep.
And, whether you got impaled, shot, or you're a 90-year-old man in your deathbed, this is pretty much what the last feeling is going to be. So I think I really wanted to have that experience of what is it going to feel like when I die, so I can kind of take that off my list of things I should be worrying about and just enjoying the life that I had. And it was about, I think, 40% pleasant, 60% not so pleasant, and I was able to own that. I wasn't, I didn't realize how healthy I should have been eating beforehand. I think, I'm not sure if I mentioned in the book, but the last meal I had before doing it was McDonald's. And it wasn't, later on, I didn't do any research going into it. And then later on, I did research after the fact. And then I learned that people were like, no, try going vegan for 6 weeks beforehand, clean out your system, get it all ready. It was insightful. I think I learned a lot from the experience. And maybe one day I'll revisit it. It may not be in the Amazon jungles this time. I might find something a little bit more comfortable, but I think, you learn and you grow.
You said something about that experience that related with me in terms of meditation. You were talking about you were having a vision about a wolf, and you thought to yourself, oh, this looks like the wolf from The Simpsons. The wolf started reshaping itself into the cartoon, and you began understanding how your thoughts can shape your visions, right? And Then you go on to say the goal wasn't control, though, that your thoughts were actually polluting it, and your goal was to stop thinking. And that, I've been meditating for 4 years every day now. I've noticed that I can see how my thoughts influence my ideas of things and how they can warp things. And I realize that even that is a bias, and that ultimately the goal is to come in and to not think and to just be, right? And to be really detached. When you said that and I read that, I was like, dude, this like totally makes sense to me. You know what I'm saying? And
It
you
was a
went on.
very difficult concept for me to grasp because they kept saying, like, if you feel like you're going to die, just die.
What
And
you
I
think
mean,
you become. Yeah.
yeah, what you think you become. And I feel like anybody listening who's done anything, any type of intoxicant, whether you're talking about alcohol, weed, anything, there's always this level of, hey, get your try to regain your composure. And this was the first time I was told, no, regaining your composure is not on the list. You may not. You have to let go completely. And that's just something we all rarely do in life. So I feel like I might have to practice that a little bit more in doing so. And but again, even my inability to do so was something that I learned from it.
Yeah, man. You actually said, the shaman said, if you feel like you're going to die, don't resist it, die. And I was like, holy shit, man, that's some serious stuff right there.
Yeah, it was intense, and I'm grateful for the experience, and that I made it out alive.
Definitely, man. Yeah, you lastly, you did say like there was a time during the trip where you left the tent or wherever you were, and you were outside, and there was a junior shaman who was like, I'm gonna let you spend 5 more minutes outside, but you need to come back in because the outside world is distracting. You need to go back inside, go back within yourself and face what you need to face, because that's what the experience is about. That's so symbolic for what life is, man, because like everything physical, money, cars, clothes, women, it's all a distraction. And like us being able to look inside and to be able to, kind of align with that, I feel like it changes the way we value the outside world. And if we get it right in here, I notice a lot more goes right outside.
Completely, and that's a good point. Just because, and that's the big thing I've realized in Hollywood is because a lot of these guys, I had homeboys that were making, like $100,000 a month, and yeah, and sad, but they were sad. And I realized the reason they were sad is not because, the money doesn't make them happy. It's because they're actually, now they can afford to continually distract themselves. Like, as the shaman said to me, close your eyes, go inwards, but if I have, and he didn't let me stay outside. You know what I mean? He brought me back inside. But you get to a position where you can buy anything you want and do anything. Then now you don't ever have to look inside. Now it's like, hey, let me spend the money on this. Once that wears off, I'll spend the money on this. Once that wears off. And again, going back to sustainability, if you're going to keep earning it, but then by all means, go ahead and use it, But at the same time, I think that was a really big moment for me to kind of realize that, hey, I'm really glad that most of my struggles when I went through this, I couldn't afford to run away from them. I couldn't afford any other options. I had to stand there and face them. So now that, and I'm very grateful, things are dramatically better for me now. I'm not resorting to any of that stuff. I still live a very simple life, even though I don't have to anymore. And it's because I realized the futility in most of those things, and I mean, maybe if I was 10 years younger, I'd be balling out, but I'm really grateful. And the circle I keep now too, there's a lot of, people who are well-to-do, but nice and cheap, sticking with our parents' tradition of just being very cheap.
Amen. Man, that is, thank you so much for sharing that. So before we transition to the last segment of our show, I wanted to read to our audience something that you wrote at the end of your book that just I vibed with really hardcore. So it said, get out there, be uncomfortable, make mistakes, get embarrassed. It's not a big deal. We'll all be dead soon, right? That's some powerful stuff for any creatives out there who are just having trouble putting themselves out there. Man, we're all going to die. So like whatever you got, just get out there, man. Even if you mess up, you're probably going to learn something. You know what I'm saying? So
and you know what? Even if you believe in heaven and hell, you're still going to die. And
exactly.
all of, these expectations and these struggles and these pressures and everything that people are placing on you, they're not going to follow you, irrespective of what you believe happens after you die. And I think it's not in our coding to want to remember our mortality. I don't think, Mother Nature really wants us to think about our death, but I think it's such a liberating idea. Sixth philosophy pushes it a lot. And I actually, I just posted that on Instagram with an extended story behind it. and explaining that one of the origins of that was my father, because I had lost my grandfather. If this was the last day of your life, what would the decision be? And I've been really kind of pushing that, towards myself sometimes, because I realize the things that pushes me to do is not the big, giant steps in my life. It's the small things. It's just being able to call somebody and being like, hey, can we have a discussion about this, or having that uncomfortable conversation with somebody, or, having an uncomfortable conversation with ourselves. And I think those are the subtle things that we're always avoiding on a regular basis, where we're all, on our phones, distracting ourselves, getting that dopamine to avoid that stuff. But if it's the last day of our lives, what are the things that we wish we could do? We should live like that accordingly. And, it's a watered down, mild version of YOLO, but I think it works.
That's dope, man. Awesome. So the last segment of our show is basically we go on our Instagram and we tell our followers to submit questions. And we had a ton of questions submitted to you. First question that was submitted was by Jazzy Rye 11. And she asked, what moments or experiences in your life most inspired compassion in you?
Most recently, I had this moment with Lily's puppy, actually, Scarborough. I was taking care of him. He's a young guy. He just turned 1. I had a dog growing up. I had a big German Shepherd. So big guy, family dog. And I was it's a good experience. I had him for 11 years, lived out his life. It was beautiful. And then our whole family was so heartbroken over losing him. We just decided no more dogs in our life. And then Lily went ahead and got this dog. She got this little 3-pound guy, and he was a puppy. And it was just very, he was misbehaving, and, he was biting. He didn't do a lot of damage, but there was this moment where I had to leave. I was watching him, but I had to go out for a dinner, and I got a little bit late. And then I came back. And when I came back, just the way he was crying and the way he looked at me, it just kind of melted me, because I really realized, like, whoa, like, this guy's only been on this earth for like 5 months, and I have so many expectations of him to, like, not pee on the carpet, not do this, not that. And he looked at me like, I'm sorry, please don't leave me again. And it really melted me, being like, yo, I'm being too hard on him and other people and on myself. Wow. Everybody's just trying their best. Like, he's a year now. He's way better behaved. He gets everything. And I was like, I was comparing this 5-month-old little puppy to my 11-year-old dog who had everything figured out. And I don't remember the early times when my dog used to have accidents in the house and stuff too. But that really made me have a lot more compassion towards kind of everybody in my life at that point who I had unnecessary opinions on how they were conducting their life and doing their stuff. And, it's a challenge because, I try to strive to be a high level achiever and a hard worker. But, I'm a human being. I got to cut myself some slack. And through cutting myself some slack, I need to cut other people slack and let everyone realize that everyone's just trying their best with what they have, with the tools they have. And not everybody knows what I know, and I don't know what everybody else knows. And we just have to have a lot more compassion towards each other for that. And instead of waiting for others to show us compassion, let's be the first ones to show them compassion.
Yo, man, we're all at different points in our lives. That's so beautiful, man. Thank you so much. We had Noor L_EIN. She asked, how do you get yourself to focus, to work and create when you don't want to?
That's a good question. I don't know. We should ask somebody else that. I'm in the same boat. I think the saving grace for me was my years living in LA with Lily, just because she's such a workhorse that, even if you work half as hard as her, you're still working like 5 times harder than any other human being. So I don't think I'm the hardest worker in the room anymore, but I definitely realize my output is a lot higher than most people just because of those experiences. Let's not rely on motivation. Let's rely on habits. So, realize what your triggers are, realize the things that are getting in the way. So, like, for me, the big thing was having a computer that didn't have internet access while working on my book,
wow.
So now I don't have to worry about willpower to, like, I'm going to go on Reddit. I'm going to go on this hip hop website. Like, they don't exist because I can't go on the website. I installed Chrome plugins on my laptop as well. So I got half an hour on all my procrastination websites a day before I get locked out. So really, I have an alarm clock, like a real alarm clock, not a cell phone to wake me up in the morning. So being very mindful of your triggers and creating an environment so you don't have to rely on your own willpower to get stuff done. and realizing that, 80% of it's getting started. And once you get started, you'll start to develop flow.
Love it, man. So Nick RN Injector asked, I want to know how people perceive your straight up truths. Have you ever been criticized for your work, and how do you overcome criticism?
I get criticized every day. I honestly don't care. Like, I think where I grew up is people are a little bit rougher around the edges. So everybody kind of takes shots at everybody and throws little darts and daggers all the time. So, all my childhood friends are assholes and they make fun of me all the time. But I have a certain level of skin. So I think if I see something online, if there's no wit to it, then it's really not going to have much of an impact on me. As well as I kind of realize that, online criticism and hate is like the modern day graffiti, because people want to be noticed. And I have compassion for that, and I get that. I personally don't engage with it just because it'll always be the minority for any creator, anybody creating. It'll always be that 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 50. And I don't think that's fair to the other 50. Everybody's like, great work, good job. And that starts to become the C. And then all of a sudden someone's like, you suck. And you're like, oh, I need to address this one person. Yeah, I'm not here to prove people wrong. I'm here to grow a community and let people know that the energy that they've invested into me is worth it. I started out sleeping on people's couches, and everybody who's ever helped me since day one is still pretty much in my life, and making them know that they're right and putting that love, energy, time, and attention into me is much more sustainable than trying to prove the invisible internet wrong.
Man, thank you. So our last question, we ask all of our guests who join us for the podcast, what is your definition of MEDspiration?
I think my definition of MEDspiration would be, really paying attention to, what you're consuming in your life, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and the impact that it has on you. Just because Humble the Poet can take cyberbullying and not be impacted doesn't mean you have to live up to me. I think it's really encouraging self-awareness, trying to understand what you take in, how much you take in, how much of an impact it has on you. And at the same time, too, is what you put out there. Whenever we want to help other people, you will encounter dramatically less resistance and obstacles when you want to help other people. It's only when you're trying to do stuff for yourself are you going to come across the naysayers and the what have you. So being aware of what you're bringing into your world, being aware of what you're putting out there, and anything that you want in your life, the first step, in my opinion, is to put that stuff out there. Be what you want. Be the friend that you want in your life.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I thought it was powerful. If you guys loved it, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. MEDspiration is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, a public charity. The more you help our podcast grow, the more people we're able to help. It is our mission to serve in underserved and underprivileged areas all over the world. So be sure to click subscribe and rate us 5 stars. The bigger we get, the more people we're able to help, guys. So thank you so much for all the support out there. And again, a big thank you to our sponsor, Caribbean Medical University. Caribbean Medical University has partnered with MEDspiration to bring you a once-in-a-lifetime discount. You can visit cmumed.org/MEDspiration and enter the discount code MDSPR to have your entire application fee waived. That's a $75 value. Apply today and see if medicine is in your future. Let's make a commitment together, guys, and attempt to live a healthier lifestyle. Mentally, physically, and spiritually. And as always, you know what time it is. It's time to get out there and do something med-spiring.